Welcome to Moments with MamasteFit. In this episode, we're going to be talking all about the research and our professional experience with the spacing between pregnancies known as interpregnancy intervals. So how long should you wait before your next baby to help optimize your pregnancy and birth outcomes? Welcome to Moments with MamasteFit. In these mini episodes, we're going to be breaking down the research and our professional experience as a birth worker, as a labor and delivery nurse, birth doula, perinatal fitness trainers, and occasionally we have Pelvic PTs that come on these episodes to chat all about what is our experience that we are seeing day to day so that you can learn from us to help support your own pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And so in this episode today, we're going to be talking about spacing of pregnancies because we get asked this question a lot. How long should I wait until my next baby? What is the optimal spacing? Maybe you want your kids closer together. Maybe you're a little bit older and you're like, I don't got 10 years to space these kids out. Like my eggs, they're frying up or whatever.
But also 40, taking care of a newborn.
It's a lot
of energy.
And so there might be different circumstances going on with your family as to why you maybe want pregnancies a little bit closer together. Maybe you want them a little bit more spaced out. So we're going to break down what does research say and what have we seen in our own clients.
So interpregnancy interval, as Gina was saying, is the difference between the delivery of one baby, so the end of a pregnancy or the delivery of the baby to the beginning of the next. There is also something called the birth to birth interval. So this is from delivery to the next impending delivery. What is that interval? And with interpregnancy interval, we have to always talk about VBAC or TOLAC, so vaginal birth after cesarean, because this is something that's probably harped on the most and most commonly talked about in pregnancies following cesareans. And this is more so dependent on the provider of which interval they prefer. Some want an interpregnancy interval of 18 months. So this is from delivery to the next pregnancy of 18 months. But some providers also believe birth to birth 18 months is acceptable for VBAC. So understanding that there are two different intervals that some people kind of interchangeably use can be helpful if you are planning a birth after cesarean and you're wanting to have a vaginal birth.
Is there any set research or guidance on which one for VBAC?
ACOG does go by birth to birth, 18 months. And it might have changed since I've recently read it, but 18 months from birth to the next birth, 18 months is acceptable. So that would be 9 months in between pregnancies.
With my own doula clients, I've seen a mix, even in the same clinic, where some will say you have to be at least a year postpartum before you get pregnant with your next baby. And then some will say you have to be at least 18 months before the baby is born. And so if you're less than a year, they're supportive of you going for a VBAC at that birth. And so I've seen both, and it can vary from provider to provider, but definitely really important as a part of your family planning conversation of, okay, when should I start trying for my next baby? Like what timing would be appropriate if you are wanting a VBAC? When it comes to VBAC, the biggest concern usually is that uterine rupture, so the uterus opening up when we don't want it to. And this could increase if you get pregnant within the first 6 months postpartum because it's based on the tissue healing timeline. And so if you are within that first 6 months, the risk of uterine rupture is a little bit higher than if you're past that first 6 months time frame. So I would say like at the absolute minimum, 6 months before your next pregnancy. That's also, that stresses me out. Like personally, I'm 6 months postpartum right now, and the thought of being pregnant is terrifying.
Yeah. Person dependent. But based off of research for VBACs, greater than 18 months between deliveries has shown to have lesser risk of uterine rupture. But when there's less than 18 months between deliveries, there's an increased risk of uterine rupture. But then less than 6 months, there's not necessarily a statistically increased risk of uterine rupture specifically, but there's an increased risk of maternal mortality in general, as well as an increased risk of blood transfusions for many reasons, potentially one of them being a uterus rupture. So just to recap all of that, there are two intervals. There's the interpregnancy interval, so delivery or end of one pregnancy, so to include like a miscarriage, to the beginning of the next pregnancy, interpregnancy interval. But then there is the birth to birth interval that is sometimes utilized during VBACs from the birth of one baby to the expected birth of the next baby. But we're going to go back to interpregnancy interval because this is usually the question of like how far apart should my babies be based off of research? Like what is the recommended distance between? Because the shorter this interval is, the increased risks associated with your pregnancies as well as for babies. So the ideal distance between pregnancies, so again, delivery of one to the beginning of the next is 18 to 24 months is the ideal distance based off of research to have the most optimal pregnancies. One, it allows your body to fully recover from pregnancy and postpartum and childbirth and like be back at like a normal state and ready to take on another pregnancy. But also like just mentally, a lot of people need that 18 to 24 months to recover mentally from childbirth.
For me, the 18-month mark was when I was like, all right, I feel like myself again. I feel like I'm very healed. And then also kind of gave me time to do my preconception workup where I can start focusing on preparing for the next pregnancy. My babies are just over 2 years apart, each of them. The first ones were 3 years apart. And then it was like over 2 years apart. And I found that space to be really great for me and for my family because I felt just really good at that 18-month mark to begin thinking about my next baby.
And for most people that we have talked to, most feel like 18 months at a minimum was when they started to feel like themselves again and ready to take on another pregnancy. But with my own personal situation, I was 15 months postpartum with both of my subsequent pregnancies. So below the 18-month recommendation. The first one maybe was not on purpose, but the second one was because I was like, I'm ready. I feel ready to have a baby at 15 months postpartum. So the other two intervals of interpregnancy intervals that come with different risks, less than 6 months from birth to next pregnancy is associated with the most risks for that current pregnancy. One, the risk for miscarriage and stillbirth are higher, as well as low birth weight for baby. So it's sometimes called SGA or small for gestational age. Infant mortality is higher when there's less than 6 months difference, as well as preterm birth and preterm labor is more likely. And this is believed that the cervix just recovered from pushing out a baby and like 6 months ago just did that. So that this pregnancy, it's almost like muscle memory. And this is why every labor gets a little bit easier because it's like muscle memory. It just like knows what to do. So the cervix might prematurely start to dilate and open because it was like, oh, I know what this is. Like we literally just did this. So I guess we need to open up again. So that is why less than 6 months potentially is unwanted or not recommended. With this, though, there is also an increased risk of 45% of pregnancies are unplanned, just all around, in general. And many people will utilize the lactation amenorrhea method as birth control for the first 6 months because they're like breastfeed. They say less than 6 months, if I'm breastfeeding, then I can't get pregnant. So less than 6 month intervals is not recommended for in-between pregnancies. But it is important to note that while it's not recommended, 45% of pregnancies are unplanned, with 1 in 3 women getting pregnant within 18 months of their last pregnancy. Again, whether that one is unplanned or not. Birth control in between pregnancies to prevent shorter intervals is really recommended, but ensuring you know that it's never 100% like foolproof. The only 100% method to prevent getting pregnancy is abstinence. But that's not an accessible option for all of us depending on our desires. So using some form of birth control and understanding what's going on within our body can really be helpful to prevent pregnancies if we're not wanting them just yet. After, though, the 6 month interval, so not recommended by providers to have a less than 6 month interval, but then 6 to 18 months, there is increased risks associated even with the 16 to 18 months, but it's more of a moderate increased risk versus where less than 6 months there is a lot more risks. So this is the window that it becomes a conversation of what are your plans for your family? Like how many kids are you wanting in your family? Like how is your health? How old are you? Are you 19 and you want 7 children? Well, you can space them out because you have a lot of time until you're like 40. Or are you 35 and you want 7 children? Like you might have to have them a little bit closer together because most women hit menopause around age 51. So unless you are the person who's not going to hit menopause till 70, like you got to speed this thing up. So these are all things that we're going to take into account anytime we're going to be discussing interpregnancy interval with patients. But if no one has preconception appointments with their provider, so if they're planning pregnancies, if you never meet with your provider to do this preconception counseling, they can't tell you all of this information. So I always recommend preconception counseling before even getting pregnant the first time, so you can make these decisions of like, how can I set myself up, not for just this first pregnancy, because this first pregnancy matters, but like subsequent pregnancies. Like, how far apart do I want all of my kids? And how can I set myself up in like the best health status now so that I can maybe have really short interval pregnancies of like 12 months between kids, but still not feel like trash at the end?
For me, before my third and fourth baby, I did a preconception appointment with my provider. It was just my primary care doctor. It wasn't an OB or a midwife. And at that appointment, we did like a full panel of blood work. I couldn't tell you exactly what he did. He reads them, not me. And so we did all this blood work. We especially were really monitoring like my thyroid to make sure like it was operating at the optimal point. And looked at everything to see like what was going on. Were there any nutritional deficiencies that I had going on that maybe we want to address either with supplementation, or I want to add in a little bit more certain types of food into my diet? Did we need to adjust my thyroid medication? And so this was something that I did about 6 months before we even began like planning for a pregnancy. And I found to be like really helpful for me, like mentally, to know that I was doing everything that I could to help prepare my body. And then also like being able to have that conversation with my provider to figure out, okay, what are things that I should change or what should I keep the same? And I found that to be really helpful going into the next two pregnancies, where I don't know if it was completely related or just like luck. Like we conceived like the first cycle that we tried, and then we didn't have any complications during either pregnancy, which I was like really grateful for.
So preconception counseling, I cannot like recommend enough. Like if you feel like within the next 1 to 2 years, you're going to want to start trying to have a baby, that is when you make your appointment with your provider or even like a midwife or an OB provider to start the process of making sure that your body is ready. Because again, 45% of pregnancies are unplanned, where like they had zero prep prior to getting pregnant, and they could not be in the best shape or the best health that they possibly wanted to be going into pregnancy. So meeting with someone like in advance can be really helpful to set yourself up for, if you do happen to have shorter interpregnancy intervals, that you still are in a good health status. So like myself, like I had 15 months in between my 2 or 3 pregnancies, but like in between my first and my second and my third, I had a shorter interval pregnancy. I did not have any of the complications of stillbirth or preterm labor, preterm birth, or none of my babies were small, unfortunately. Like I would have taken that one for like maybe just like a 7-pound baby instead of an 8.5. But I didn't have any of the complications because I did like kind of do some preconception counseling with my first to kind of put my body in a better position health-wise so that I could withstand shorter interval pregnancies.
So typically for me as a doula, my clients that are nearing 40 are trying to condense their pregnancies, like decrease the length between the two of them because they're getting older. They don't want to wait 4 years in between kids. They don't want to wait 18 months between pregnancies because they're going to be like 50 by the time they have all the kids that they're wanting. And so in those situations, you know, having the conversation with your provider about what the gapping is that you want based on your family planning is going to be really helpful for you. I have had clients that have had really short pregnancy intervals, and some of them did have complications during their labor. Some of them were just really mentally overwhelmed by having like that, of not feeling ready for another baby. And so these are like other things to consider as well. It's not just like what like physical complications are happening. It could be mentally challenging as well. And so if you do end up having a pregnancy that happens a lot sooner than you were anticipating, you know, having conversation with your provider on like how are we going to monitor this pregnancy? How are we going to monitor me during labor? Like, what are your recommendations? What can I do now to try to optimize things as best as possible? Because I know that we talked about a lot of scary stuff. If like, let's say you do get pregnant within the first 6 months, that's a lot of scary things to know that you're at increased risk for different things. And so we can really utilize our providers to help us figure out, okay, what can I do to optimize things for me as best as possible to give me and my baby the best chance for a healthy pregnancy and for good birth outcomes? Because again, it's a lot. This might be a little bit scary, but if we can, try to be outside that first 6 months if possible.
Sometimes it's unpreventable. Like, obviously, life happens, and some people want them that close together. I think it's like Irish twins. Like, some people want that, and that's okay as long as they understand like the risks associated, and we will just monitor them closer throughout their pregnancies for any of these complications, because we can most of the time be able to see early signs and be able to be proactive. But by being proactive with your provider and like having these conversations, it builds that trust where you feel safe to go to them for any of your concerns. Another thing that we haven't touched on yet, though, in interpregnancy interval, we've talking a lot about short intervals. So like the increased risk of having short interval pregnancies between births of less than 6 months, 6 to 18 months, and like the ideal time is 18 to 24 months. But that's the ideal time, like that's the ideal distance for like all pregnancies. If you have a larger interpregnancy interval, there also comes with risks. When the interpregnancy interval is greater than 50 months, there is an increased risk noted of increased preeclampsia and increased gestational diabetes, but it's not known if it's truly the distance of the pregnancies or the fact that you were just 50 months older than you were when you had your last baby. Like, your current state of health at that time is a lot different than you were 50 months ago. But then also, our body, like I said, muscle memory is great for the shorter interval pregnancies. Like, you go into labor very quickly when it's a shorter interval pregnancy. In that 18 to 24 months, your body still remembers it, but you're like fully healed most of the time. But when it's been longer than 50 months, they call it like amnesia. It's almost like your first baby again, because your body has forgotten what it did last time. So then it's almost like you have a first labor again. So when we have patients at the hospital who may have had their first baby when they're early 20s with a previous marriage, and then they got divorced, and now they're with a new partner, and it's like 10 years, 5 to 10 years from the last baby, and they're now having a new one. One, it's a new partner, so it's like just a whole new situation in general, but it's like their labors are completely different. It's almost like this is their first baby because it was a long gap in between. Your body like doesn't have the muscle memory anymore because it's forgotten what it did last time. So ideal pregnancy intervals is 18 to 24 months for our bodies as well, but less than 50 months also ideal, which not everyone talks about that one.
No, I guess we always only focus on the short time frame. We don't ever really think about the long time frame. I think most folks are kind of phasing out of the childbearing years by that point.
I think that also like is a part of it. Is so many people that I know who are like 15 months, like the kids are like in school, like out of diapers, potty trained.
You lose the muscle memory of baby too.
Yeah, like you're like, oh wait, I have to change diapers. Like I get a stroller. Like there's a lot. It's a huge shift mentally as well to go from like child raising back.
I mean, there's a big difference between
childbirth.
a 5-year-old and a baby.
Yeah,
huge difference.
But for some people, that is what is perfect for their family. So that's why with this whole interpregnancy interval, just to wrap it all up, shared decision-making, preconception counseling is so beneficial. Learning when do you want to be pregnant again if you've already had one baby? Like, when do you want to be pregnant again? How many kids do you want? If you want 7 children, like there's a lot of prior planning for that. 7 children is a lot. Like, I mean, just in general, that's 7 times 9, like, that's 63 months of just pregnancy alone. Yes, I'm doing this. That's 63 months of just pregnancy, not including the recovery time in between. So this is a lot of planning that needs to go into place, but doing shared decision-making with your provider of like, hey, if I want a lot of kids, but I'm getting older every day, like what is like a good interval, and like how can we work together to do this so that when you have your 7th kid, you're not having your baby at 24 weeks.
How many people are you seeing in clinic that have 7 kids?
I have seen quite a few that have had quite a few babies.
Okay.
It's not unheard of. I just think 7 is like isn't that like a lucky number? I just keep saying 7. It's just like an easy number.
I think most people have 2, but
But like, there's not as much prior planning for 2 kids as there is
that's
7.
fair.
So that's why
fair.
I think I just keep picking 7. Like, if you're wanting a lot of kids, it's a lot of prior planning. But even 2, if you are 40 and you want 2 kids, that is a whole different conversation than, again, if you're 25 wanting 2 kids.
Absolutely. So if you are wanting to learn more about interpregnancy intervals and you're trying to figure out your family planning, like Roxanne said, having a conversation with your provider is a really great place to start, especially because they can talk about your personal medical history, what your desires are for your family. But knowing that generally research says between 18 to 24 months is a really good gap between your pregnancies, and that would be a good place to start. So thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you want to learn more from us to help support your pregnancy, check out our online prenatal fitness programs and our online childbirth education course. Our prenatal fitness programs are designed to help you feel comfortable and to feel strong as you move through your pregnancy to help prepare you for birth, which again is a huge part of navigating a healthy pregnancy is moving your body regularly. And then our childbirth education course is going to be there to help guide you to understand what is going on during labor. You're going to learn labor positions, labor comfort measures, what is the timeline, what is a contraction, what are your birth options. There's a lot in the course, so I could just keep listing bullet points of what's included in there. But if you want more support during your pregnancy, check those out. You can bundle them together to save an additional 15% off. And you can use code MOMENTS10 to get 10% off any of our online offerings. If you're outside of pregnancy and you're trying to figure out when you should get pregnant next, check out our postpartum programs. Those are a really great option to help support you so that you can feel strong and ready for the next pregnancy as well. So thanks so much for listening to this episode. We do a Moments with MamasteFit episode every other Friday where we share our professional expertise and the research to help support you during your pregnancy, your birth, and beyond. Let's take a break from this week's episode to hear about our podcast sponsor, Needed. Needed is a nutrition company that specializes in optimizing nourishment for the perinatal timeframe that Roxanne and I have personally utilized to help support our preconception, to support us during pregnancy, and after pregnancy as well. And one of our favorite products is their prenatal vitamins.
Their prenatal vitamin is a more complete vitamin that is backed by research of the actual nutrients our bodies need. 90% of women are in a nutrient deficit going into pregnancy. So just like a normal generic prenatal vitamin doesn't have all the nutrients that we need for an optimal pregnancy. So Needed was very mindful by creating 3 different options of a prenatal that you could take depending on like what fit your needs. They have their original prenatal multi-powder that's really great for first trimester for when taking 8 pills is not on the table. If you're nauseous, if you have heartburn, like drinking pills is not a very feasible option for most of us. So that powder is really great to add into smoothies, add into your coffee. It has a very light vanilla flavor. Then they came out with their capsules. It is 8 capsules for their full prenatal multi, but then they came out with an essentials that's only 3 capsules. So they understand not all of us want to take 8 capsules a day, but we still want quality nutrients. So they created their essentials that is only 3 capsules a day. So all of these 3 are great options for pregnancy. And again, we want to start taking them prior to conceiving to help create the nutrients and have a good level of nutrients going into pregnancy. And one of the really nice things about Needed is it's kind of like make your own adventure with their prenatals because they understand that certain nutrients kind of counteract one another, such as calcium and iron. So calcium is in a prenatal, which is really important for our bones, for our baby especially. But iron is also really helpful for a lot of us because anemia is very common during pregnancy. But if we take them at the same time, it lessens the absorption. So their iron is separate than their prenatal, so you can add it into your little concoction if needed.
In addition, not everybody needs all of those things as well, and so it's a really great option about Needed is you can kind of pick and choose what works best for you as an individual. We highly recommend taking Needed's prenatal vitamins during your preconception phase, throughout your pregnancy. We still take them now in our postpartum. Our mom also takes them now that she's in menopause because it's really beneficial for that time frame as well. So it's a great supplement that we highly recommend and personally use, and we only recommend brands that we love and trust.
And this podcast is sponsored by Needed, a nutrition company focused on the perinatal time frame that both Gina and I have utilized during our pregnancies, postpartums, and beyond still to this day. And if you want to check them out, head to thisisneeded.com and use code MamastePod to get 20% off your first order or the first month of your subscription.